Okay, in today's video, we're going to wrap up the first quarter of the year. Time just keeps on going. It's both been such a long quarter and such a short one. But let's get into it. We're going to go over my stats briefly, and then we're going to go into some hits, misses, and surprises. That's what this video will be. And so starting off with some stats. I've read 38 books, and the total number of pages, including audiobooks, has been 16,870 pages, which means my average book length is 444 pages, which is like, wow. I don't actually know how I've accomplished this. I have no sense of how this happened. It has to be immersion reading or audiobooks or something. I guess maybe going through these stats, I'll figure out this mystery because I defended in March, and I distinctly remember in March that I had like a week and a half where I didn't read books. And yeah, I don't know how this happened, but it did. And briefly, if you want to know the pages that I read / immersion read, not including audio, I'll have a chart up right now with January, February, and March. It's all about the same. I read 12 books in both January and February and 14 in March, and the page numbers are the same for January and March and a little lower for February, which makes sense. Like, none of that is surprising to me. My average rating is still about a 4.1, which is normally where I live. I live usually around a 4-star rating based off how I choose to rate books. And let's get into one of my favorite charts. This is my series and standalones chart. So this chart tells me how many standalone short stories am I reading, but also how many starts of series am I reading, how many in the middle, how many have I caught up or gotten to the end to. It's just a nice visual. And in general, I feel like I'm doing pretty okay, definitely starting more, but also it's the beginning of the year. I start a lot of things, and still like middle and caught up is still a large part of this chart. So I'm not upset about it, and 42% are standalones. That's also really good, with one short story collection. So I'm happy with that. I like this chart. It's like a nice visual cue for myself to be like, so you're reading series. Are you continuing them? Are you finishing them? What are you doing, Angela? In terms of years published, I'm sure no one's surprised that it's primarily modern books. This is who I am. I don't read that many classics. I don't read that many backlist. I do occasionally, but it has to be a very like special book to grab my interest because I have always loved the shiny new things at the bookstore. It is who I am. In terms of breakdown of format, so maybe this will answer the question of how I am reading so much. We've got 41% Kindle, 14% physical, 5% Kindle immersion, so I'm reading on my Kindle and immersion reading it, and that might include one more book than is listed because I maybe wrote it as something else, and then 30% audiobook. And I think that's substantial, that 11 of the books that I've read were audiobooks, and that has to be a substantial part of this page count. I've gotten really good at audiobooks. Like when I first started 2 years ago, audiobooks in me, it's like 1.25 speed, and that was all I could do. And now, even without immersion reading, I can do 2.25, 2.3 times speed and retain the information. I'm actually really impressed with that. I can't make my eyes physically read faster, but I guess my ears have been able to learn this skill. That said, my listening is about now the same as my reading speed, so I'm kind of plateaued. I am at this one speed. And let's get into the author breakdown, since some of my goals usually surround that. I've been wanting to read more male authors, and I feel like I've made an attempt, but it's still pretty bad, where 30% of the authors I rate, or I guess 29%, have been male, and then 68% have been female, with one being non-binary. So yeah, and I don't double count authors for this. I've only read 31 authors this year, even though I've read 38 books. So it's okay, could stand to be better. I really do need to increase the number of non-binary and male authors on this list. It is what it is. I've also been keeping track of continents that I've been reading from, because I've been trying to read outside of the US and stuff like that. And I have read 2 authors from Asia, 4 from Europe, 24 from North America, and 1 from Oceania. So we're doing okay. Definitely room for improvement there. And in terms of my author race breakdown, where I just split it into authors of color and white, I have 52% white and 48% author of colors, and it's actually like just a 1 book difference. It's 16 books by white authors and 15 books by authors of color. I'll also put in a chart about my genre breakdown. My most read is fantasy, followed by science fiction, although I feel like this year science fiction has been having a stronger start, which I always have to do because I just am who I am, and at the end of the year, I always just gravitate to all of the fantasy series. It's just so cozy for me. So I need to get all my sci-fi reading in now. But it's also been such a source of joy. I've really been liking reading the sci-fi stories I've been reading. And there's been an uptick in romance because I have speculative and romance, and I actually have just lumped them together into romance, even though I only have like one contemporary romance. And I have some historical fiction, and nonfiction has actually had a bit of an uptick this year because of Jess Owen's book club. I always read at least one every 2 months for that, and actually for our next book club I think we're reading 2, so that's for sure been a good accountability there because I do like to be reading nonfiction. I'm also saying all of this having not seen this chart. I've seen the data, but I forgot to make this chart before filming this video, so if editing Angela had to come in, I'm really sorry to future me. Let's get into my hits, misses, surprises. We'll start with misses. We'll start negative, work our way to positive. But just so you know, I chose misses to be books that I was disappointed in, like that I expected to like. I didn't pick things that I just didn't like. Like, so Wheel of Time is not here. We all know that I have had a mixed experience with Wheel of Time. It was not a miss. It performed exactly as expected, you know? So these are actually books that I actually expected to have like a 4-star or higher experience, and it didn't happen, and I was bummed. And we're just going in order in which I saw them in Storygraph when I wrote this list down, and we're gonna have to start with Malice, which I do have a full review of, where I have like pros and cons alternating between those two. And yeah, I was expecting this to be like an all-new consume me fantasy favorite series, because all of my friends love it, and I don't. I don't know when I'll get to Valor. I'm so attracted to so many other fantasy things right now that the idea of picking up like a 700-page sequel to a 600-page first book that I didn't love is really hard. My biggest issues with it were character work and writing, which are kind of deal breakers for me if I think about it. Like, I can forgive writing if I really care about the characters, and if a writing is good enough to stand on its own most of the time, other things fall into place. But here I just had a rough time, so I'll point you to that review if you really want to know my thoughts. But I was just really disappointed. So many of my friends love it. It seemed like it was going to have all the tropes that I like in a fantasy. And although it did have tropes that I like, and I didn't mind the world building, and I didn't mind the plot that was set up, I had just an issue reading it. And that said, I read it in 2 days. It was a really fast read, but I didn't like the process of reading it, which was kind of a bummer. Next, we'll talk about Ancillary Justice. This was supposed to be the next sci-fi series that I really wanted to sink my teeth into, and it just did not happen, and I was so bummed. Because I heard that it had world building that was similarly complex, but well done, like Nine Fox Gambit, my other favorite like sci-fi space opera series, and that did not happen. We have a book club discussion for this one if you want to hear my thoughts and the thoughts of people who did enjoy this. I didn't hate anything about the execution. I think it was more just what the story that wanted to be told was not the story I wanted to hear, and I didn't like how removed our first-person perspective was. I don't like a passive first-person perspective. I'm learning that about myself very quickly. Like, if it's going to be first-person, I want to know more about the first person. Like, I want to be involved in them. Like, I want to know what they're thinking. I want to know what they're feeling. That sort of thing. So I think because of that, there were a lot of misses with Ancillary Justice. Like, it was perfectly well executed, but I didn't care. And for that reason, I also am not, like, eager to pick up, I think, the sequel's Ancillary Sword, even though there are so many cool ideas. And the world building is very well done. It's just a disconnect with the writing and the characters again. It's kind of a theme, apparently. Learning a lot about myself this year. And next up was House of Sky and Breath, which I expected to like. I expected to give at least a 4-star to, because I like Sarah J. Maas books. I don't always love them. I've definitely given some of her books 2.5 or 3 stars. Like, she's not a complete always hit author, but I reread House of Earth and Blood, and I really enjoyed it. So I was really excited to follow characters that I really liked from the first book into the second book, and I didn't hate my time, but like, there were good hundreds of pages that did not need to exist, and honestly, I would have been fine if it was just this long, but those pages were replaced with interesting things. Like, it's kind of one of those things where the length itself was not my issue, it was what was within that length that bothered me. Like, if you wanted to spend time forming community, having relationships develop, all those fun things, awesome, would have been there for that. Instead, there was just a lot of Bryce and the author being like, haha, didn't see that coming, did you? And I'm like, well, no, of course I didn't, because you didn't give me a chance, and this was dumb. And yeah, so I wanted to have a lot more fun than I did. I don't hate this book. I'm still kind of excited for the third book. I don't know. I just was bummed because I was having a rough time when I read this, and normally Sarah J. Maas is the author I use to get out of a rough patch, and that didn't happen. Next up is probably the one I like the most on this list, but it was bummed because I really wanted to love it, and that's The Destroyer of Light. I recently talked about this in a wrap-up, so I'll try not to be too repetitive here. But essentially, it's really well crafted. It got my nice nested narrative styles that I enjoy reading. I thought the world building was stunning, but in general, I didn't care about the story itself. I didn't care about any of the characters. Now that I'm weeks away from reading it, I barely remember what was going on. I only remember because it is a Persephone retelling, and so I know the general beats. I wish it wasn't a Persephone retelling. I kind of wish it was more based off this planet that's tidally locked and has its own issues with the alien and human races, and really digging into that. I think that would have been more fulfilling to me. As it is, I don't hate that I read it. I think actually it was a really interesting thing to read, but it's also not going to probably hold that much space in my brain. And the last one I'll talk about is The Last Story of Minna Lee. I mean, I typically like historical fictions and contemporaries. I don't read them all the time, but there are very few that I don't like. Like, very few. And this one was very popular. It was on Reese Witherspoon's book club, and I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine or whatever from that book club, and I really liked that book. So I don't know, I had this expectation that this book club is reasonable at curating books, that I would at least like it. And I did not like this book. That's really it. This is the closest one to I truly did not enjoy my experience. I would have DNF'd this book if given the option, which I did not have because I was moderating book club, but I would have DNF'd it. And again, I talked about this recently, so I'll just point you to my March wrap-up just because that came up the video before this one, so I don't feel like being so repetitive. But those are some of the misses. Now let's transition into surprises, books that surprised me. Most of the time I get surprised by books. I don't know why. Even books that I think I'll love, if I love them, I'm really surprised by that. I don't know. But these are actual true surprises where it's not that I expected them to be bad, but I did not expect the response I gave them, and they weren't necessarily 5-star reads or anything, but I was just so happy. The first one's Goliath, and this is just mainly because of the journey I went on. I have a review for this book that goes into way more detail, but essentially, this was my first arc of the year. I was excited for it because I'd heard Tochi Yanabuchi talk about this as an interview, and I wanted to read his gentrification in space adult work. I was so pumped for it. And when I first started reading it, I almost DNF'd it after 70 pages because I'm I cannot with this writing. I don't know where I am, and I'm too dumb. I was not feeling intelligent while reading this book. And part of that is it's intentionally really confusing. There are flashbacks that aren't telegraphed as flashbacks. You don't necessarily know who you are. It's sometimes unclear the identity of the person you're with. But then I got to part 3, and then I finished it, and then I basically instantly reread it. And now it's one of my favorite literary sci-fis ever. I think it's doing exactly what literary sci-fi is meant to do. And it is such a great modern example of that. So this was a very surprising turn of events to go from almost DNF to 4.5 star and reread within the same month. That was dramatic. And the next one I'll talk about is Noor by Nnedi Okorafor. This is more so because I typically have 3 to 3.5 star experiences with her works. I don't know why. I love her ideas, but when it comes down to execution, she typically moves the plot too quickly for me to connect with characters, and also seems to not focus as much on character relationships. Focuses more on the individual's experience, which is still very present in this novella. But in this novella, I get to follow 2 people together and getting to see them banter off each other and grow together and trust each other. And I think that's what made this my favorite Nnedi Okorafor, which I was not expecting because a bunch of my friends gave this 3 stars. And these are friends who typically love her other works more than me. So I think this had the stuff that I'd been missing from a lot of her other works. And I liked the ideas like I always do, and I liked that it kind of had not a mixed media angle, but it had different narrative perspectives, which I thought were really fun. So this was a real happy surprise. And the last surprise is Queens of Renthia, the series in general. I wasn't going to read this except for Reddit Bingo, which in the future we'll have some Reddit Bingo videos coming out next week. But I needed a book set in a forest and only a forest, and there are not that many of those. It had to be completely always in a forest. And Queens of Renthia is that. And I'm going to make a review video for that series soon because it stole my heart. I expected to like it. A bunch of my friends liked it. I didn't expect to be doing chores and going on errands so I could continue listening to these audiobooks because I needed to know what would happen next. This is a very plot-driven fantasy that I really liked, and it's hard for me to really latch on to plot-driven fantasy. And I think part of it is that it used a lot of tropes that I'd been missing lately, and I don't know, it was a blast. I had such a good time reading this series over the course of February and March. I'm just so glad that I did. Let's now get into my hits. The first one, it's so long ago since I read it. It was like the second book I read in the year, and that's Turning Darkness into Light. Lovely, lovely book. It's the last book in the Lady Trent world, and it's actually my favorite. I have a whole Should You Read for the Lady Trent series that I highly recommend pointing out, but this is the 6th book, and it's a companion mixed media book that follows her granddaughter, so Lady Trent's granddaughter, making a discovery as, I believe, a linguist. And I'm like forgetting the technical terms here. And I really liked the mixed media format. I'd read it in like 2 days, and it was a book that I really loved reading. I loved the optimistic theming, because it's definitely a book that you can tell that it was written during the tumultuous times that we've been having in the United States politically. You can just feel that in how it's written in like certain political aspects of this world. And I really liked the messaging that Marie Brennan put into that. It was just something that I needed when I read it. So that, plus the cool mystery, plus I just love the voice that is brought out in these books. Like, she's not Lady Trent, but I really like her granddaughter. She's got her own fire, and I really like it. Next, we have The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. I mean, it was like a 5-star short story collection. I think I loved or really liked every story in this collection. Had a great range of genres from like historical fantasy and sci-fi and different types of sci-fi. I enjoyed it. I also really enjoyed buddy reading this with Abby, Stephanie, and Evie, so that also really enhanced the experience as we all have different things. I just really like his writing style. It's very straightforward at times, but he also like utilized very different ways of writing throughout the collection. It has me very excited to read Hidden Girls and his fantasy series, because I was just thoroughly impressed by his early works, and some of them, the ways that they predicted how technology would unfold, I was just really impressed with them. Another sci-fi is The Vanished Birds. This could have been a surprise because I really didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but it's just truly a hit. This is like a favorite of all time. It had to be on this portion of the list. I love this book. I have a review for it. I don't know how to talk about it, but it was a book that 2020 did dirty. I just thoroughly loved the writing. I will read anything this author puts out because I think it's one of those times where an author's like authorial voice is just like amazing to me. The way that we spend so little time with some characters, but by the end of certain arcs or chapters, I'm just so invested in the situations they were put in. It was so masterful. I couldn't understand how I suddenly was like, wait, why do I care so much about this person I just met 20 pages ago? That happens consistently within the book. I really like the themes of it, but like also at its heart, I just enjoyed the journey of following these people and slowly discovering what the story was trying to tell me. I definitely just really recommend it, especially if you're someone who likes literary fiction or someone who likes sci-fi. I mean, as someone who loves sci-fi, it has so many call-outs to classic sci-fi tropes that were fun, and I don't know. I'm very bad at talking about this book because I love it so much. So I'll just point you to the review where I tried to be coherent, and I think I did a way better job there than I did here. And I believe the last two we're going to talk about were in my wrap-up, so I'll try and be brief because, like I said, the wrap-up just came out the video before this, but The Love Hypothesis. I really enjoyed this. It was a great time. I mean, I pretty much knew I would love it, but I didn't expect to read it in an entire day. That was a little unexpected. So there's that. It's a Grumpy Sunshine romance, and it worked for me. The hype was real. Loved it. And then, of course, Chorus of Dragons, which I've just been yelling about for a month. And I'm going to continue to yell about it until I have finished and made a review video and made all my friends read it. You know, it's just who I am this year. Last year was the year of Mask of Mirrors. This year, it's Chorus of Dragons. It's who I am. So, I mean, I'm just happy I did find my new favorite fantasy series already this quarter. It's so awesome. So, yeah, that's this video. Little stats, little hits, misses, surprises. Let me know how your first quarter of the year has been going. You know, have you had to readjust your goals? Are you on track? I don't know if I'm actually on track for my goals. I feel like I'm doing fine on the reading part, but in terms of like other stuff, I don't know. But I'm taking it one day at a time. And if you want to leave an emoji, leave a graph because we did stats. And otherwise, like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.